everyone. You're watching Reddit Storytell Time.
I was sitting in the living room staring at the clock, lost in my thoughts about how quickly time seemed to pass my wife. Julia was due back from another business trip any minute. Lately, her trips had become more frequent, but I tried not to dwell on it too much. She was ambitious after all, a quality I had always admired, even if it sometimes left me feeling like a footnote in her busy life. The sound of the front door opening snapped me out of my thoughts. Julia walked in her heels, clicking against the hardwood floor, her laughter filling the house. It wasn't just a chuckle, it was one of those full-bodied, infectious laughs that made it impossible not to smile. Except this time something felt off. The laugh was different. A little too loud, too forced, like she was trying to cover something up. "I'm back," she called out, dropping her suitcase by the door and shrugging off her coat. "You wouldn't believe the week I've had." I got up to greet her, giving her the usual hug and kiss on the cheek. "Welcome home." "How was the trip?" I asked, keeping my tone casual. "Oh, the usual," she replied, waving her hand dismissively. "Meetings, clients, networking dinners. Nothing exciting." She flashed me a quick smile, but it didn't quite reach her eyes before I could ask anything else. She turned toward the hallway. "I need a shower and maybe a glass of wine after that." "Sure thing," I said, watching her disappear into the bathroom. Something about her demeanor nagged at me, but I brushed it off. Maybe she was just tired, traveling for work wasn't easy, and Julia always needed time to decompress after a trip still. As I poured her a glass of wine in the kitchen, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. It wasn't just the laugh. It was the way she avoided meeting my eyes. The way she quickly changed the subject when I asked about her trip. And then there was the suitcase. Normally, Julia didn't care if I helped unpack, but tonight, she had snapped, "Don't touch it. I'll take care of it later." Her tone had been sharp. Too sharp for such a simple request. I tried to ignore the knot forming in my stomach, convincing myself I was overthinking things. Julia had always been fiercely independent, and I had no reason not to trust her. At least that's what I told myself. But deep down, a tiny voice whispered that something wasn't right. Later that evening, as we sat on the couch, I tried to bring up her trip again. "So did anything interesting happen while you were away?" I asked, keeping my tone light. She shrugged, not even looking up from her phone, not really, just the usual grind. The knot in my stomach tightened. Julia wasn't usually this vague. Normally, she'd have a funny story or some anecdote about a difficult client, but tonight she was unusually quiet, her focus glued to her screen. "Are you sure everything's okay?" I asked, trying to mask the concern in my voice. She finally looked up, her expression guarded. "Why wouldn't it be?" she said, her tone almost defensive. "You're acting weird, Mike." What's with all the questions? Her response caught me off guard. I wasn't interrogating her, at least I didn't think I was, but her defensiveness only fueled the unease that had been gnawing at me all evening. I forced a laugh, trying to diffuse the tension. "No reason, just curious, that's all." Julia rolled her eyes and went back to scrolling through her phone. "Well, don't be, it was just another boring trip that night." As I lay in bed next to her, listening to the soft rhythm of her breathing, I couldn't stop my mind from racing. Something didn't add up, but I didn't have anything concrete to go on. It was just a nagging sense that I was missing something important. The next morning, Julia left for work as if nothing had happened. Once she was gone, I found myself standing in front of her suitcase, staring at it like it held the answers to all my questions. I don't know what came over me, but before I knew it, I was unzipping it, my hands trembling slightly. First, everything seemed normal: clothes, toiletries, a pair of heels, but then tucked into a side pocket. I found a crumpled receipt. It was from a fancy hotel restaurant, dated just 2 nights ago, for 2 people. My heart started pounding as I stared at the receipt, my mind racing with possibilities. Julia had told me she spent that night in her hotel room, too tired to go out, so why was there a bill for 2? I wanted to believe there was a logical explanation. Maybe it was a work dinner, maybe she was entertaining a client. But as much as I tried to rationalize it, that small voice in the back of my mind wouldn't shut up. This was just the beginning, and deep down I already knew that whatever I found next would change everything. I stood there holding that receipt, feeling like the ground beneath me had just shifted. My brain worked overtime, trying to come up with any logical explanation. Julia's job often involved networking. Maybe this was just part of her work responsibilities, but no matter how I spun it, her story didn't line up. She told me she had stayed in her hotel room that night, too tired to do anything else. Why lie about something so small, shaking off the doubts that were beginning to suffocate me? I carefully tucked the receipt back into her suitcase, exactly where I found it. If I confronted her without more proof, she'd just twist it around on me, calling me paranoid or insecure. Julia was good at that, turning any argument into my fault. The rest of the day was a blur. I went through the motions, working from home, cleaning the house, making dinner, but my mind was elsewhere. I kept replaying her laugh when she walked through the door, the dismissive tone when I asked about her trip, and that icy stare when I offered to unpack her suitcase. When Julia came home that evening, she acted like nothing was wrong. She greeted me with a quick peck on the cheek, tossed her purse on the counter, and started scrolling through her phone. "What's for dinner?" she asked casually, as if the storm brewing inside me didn't exist. "Pasta," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. She nodded, barely looking up, and I couldn't help but wonder what or who she was texting. My curiosity burned, but I knew better than to ask. Julia hated when I tried to invade her privacy, as she put it that night. I decided I needed to dig deeper as Julia slept soundly beside me. I unlocked her phone. I know it's wrong, but desperation can make you cross lines you never thought you would. My hands were trembling as I scrolled through her messages, praying I wouldn't find anything. At first, everything looked normal messages from coworkers, friends, and family, but then I saw a conversation with someone named T, just a single letter. My heart started pounding as I opened the chat. The messages weren't explicit, but they didn't need to be T. Last week was amazing. I can't stop thinking about it. Julia, me too. I needed that T. When can we do it again, Julia? Soon. I'll figure something out. My stomach turned. It didn't take a genius to figure out what they were talking about. I scrolled further, but the earlier messages had been deleted. My hands clenched the phone so tightly that my knuckles turned white. I wanted to wake her up right then and there to shove the phone in her face and demand an explanation, but what good would that do? She'd deny it, twist it, somehow make me feel like I was the bad guy for snooping. Instead, I put the phone back where I found it and lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling. My mind raced with questions. Who was T? How long had this been going on? Was this her first time, or had there been others? I felt like a fool for not seeing the signs earlier. The next morning, Julia acted like everything was perfectly normal. She kissed me on the cheek before leaving for work, smiling like she didn't have a care in the world. As I watched her drive away, I made a decision. I couldn't let this go. I needed answers, and if she wasn't going to give them to me, I'd find them myself. That's when I decided to hire a private investigator. It felt extreme, but I couldn't confront her without solid proof. I needed to know the truth. No matter how much it hurt, and deep down I already knew it was going to hurt a lot. The investigator, a no-nonsense woman named Karen, assured me that she'd get to the bottom of it. If there's something going on, I'll find it, she said confidently. I handed her Julia's travel schedule and a photo of her feeling equal parts nervous and relieved. For the first time in days, I felt like I was taking control of the situation. Over the next few days, I went through the motions of daily life pretending everything was fine. Julia seemed more distant than usual, but I didn't let on that. I noticed every time my phone buzzed, my heart leapt, hoping it was Karen with an update, finally after what felt like an eternity. Karen called Mike. I've got something, she said, her voice serious. I think you should come to my office. I could barely breathe as I made my way there, my mind racing with possibilities. When I arrived, Karen slid a folder across the desk. My hands shook as I opened it, revealing photos of Julia with a man I didn't recognize. They were at a fancy restaurant, laughing, holding hands, looking like a couple in love. But the last photo was the one that broke me. It was of Julia and this man walking into a hotel together, her arm around his waist, his hand resting on the small of her back. The timestamp matched the date on the receipt I had found in her suitcase. I stared at the photos, my chest tightening with a mix of anger, betrayal, and heartbreak. Karen's voice pulled me out of my daze. Do you want me to keep digging? She asked. Gently, I shook my head no. I whispered, I've seen enough. But as I drove home, clutching that folder like it was a lifeline, I realized this was only the beginning. The truth was out. But the question remained, what was I going to do about it? But as I drove home, clutching that folder like it was a lifeline, I realized this was only the beginning. The truth was out. But the question remained, what was I going to do about it driving home? I felt like my mind was a battlefield, anger, humiliation, and heartbreak all fought for control, leaving me completely drained. My wife, my Julia, had betrayed me. Every laugh we shared, every promise she made now felt like a cruel joke. I replayed the images in my head. Julia smiling at another man, holding his hand, walking into that hotel with him. It was as if she was a stranger, not the woman I had devoted a decade of my life to. When I pulled into the driveway, her car was already there. A part of me wanted to storm in, throw the evidence in her face, and demand answers. But another part, the part of me that had spent years avoiding conflict, wanted to wait to bide my time and figure out how to handle this carefully. Julia was clever, and I knew one misstep would give her the chance to manipulate the narrative. As I stepped inside, Julia greeted me from the kitchen, a glass of wine in hand. Hey, you're home late, everything? Okay, she asked, her tone light and casual. Yeah, I said, forcing a smile. Just ran some errands. My voice sounded hollow even to my own ears, but she didn't seem to notice. Or maybe she did and didn't care. She leaned against the counter, swirling her wine. You've been quiet lately, she said, tilting her head. Is something bothering you? I nearly laughed at the irony. Something bothering me. How about the fact that I had undeniable proof of her infidelity sitting in a folder in my car, but I swallowed the words, playing the part of the clueless, doting husband. She probably thought I still was. Just work stuff, I muttered. Nothing major. Julia shrugged, seemingly satisfied with my answer, and went back to scrolling through her phone. Watching her so calm and unconcerned made my blood boil. How could she be so casual, so unaffected when she was living a double life that night? As she lay sleeping beside me, I found myself staring at her, studying her face. How long had she been lying to me? How many times had she come home from these business trips with that same fake smile, hiding the truth behind those carefully chosen words? The more I thought about it, the more I realized how blind I had been. The late-night work calls, the sudden uptick in her travel schedule, the new clothes she'd bought for work. It was also obvious in hindsight. But what broke me the most was the realization that she didn't even seem to feel guilty. She had come home laughing, relaxed, like nothing was out of the ordinary. I mean so little to her that she didn't even bother to hide the cracks in her facade. The next day, I called Karen, the private investigator, and asked her to dig deeper. I need to know everything. I told her where she's been, who she's been with, how long this has been going on. I want it all. Karen hesitated. Mike, I know this is hard, but are you sure sometimes knowing everything can make it worse? I'm already living the worst case scenario. I replied, I need the truth. Over the next week, I acted like nothing had changed. I smiled, made small talk, and pretended I didn't notice the subtle shifts in Julia's behavior. She was spending more time on her phone, taking calls in another room, and even started staying late at work. More often, every lie she told felt like a knife in my chest. But I kept my composure knowing Karen was working in the background to uncover the full extent of her betrayal. Then, one evening, Julia came home in an unusually good mood. She practically skipped through the door, a smug smile plastered across her face. You'll never believe what happened today, she said, dropping her purse on the counter. What's that? I asked, feigning interest. I got a promotion, she announced, her eyes sparkling with excitement. They're sending me to New York next month for a leadership conference. Can you believe it? I forced a smile, congratulating her as the pieces began to fall into place. Of course, she'd been buttering up someone at work to climb the corporate ladder. And now, with this promotion, she had the perfect excuse to travel even more. The audacity of it made my stomach churn. Later that night, Karen called Mike. I have everything you asked for, she said. Her tone was heavy, almost apologetic. Do you want to meet in person, or should I send it over? Send it. I said. My voice was steady, but my hands were trembling. I wasn't sure I could handle hearing it face to face. When the email came through, I opened it immediately, my heart pounding in my chest. There were photos, timestamps, even copies of her hotel bookings. Karen had tracked Julia's movements for the past 6 months, and the pattern was undeniable. She wasn't just cheating, she had been practically living a second life. But what stood out most was the name of the man she'd been seeing. It wasn't just some random coworker or client, it was her boss, the same man who had signed off on her promotion. I stared at the screen, my vision blurring with a mix of rage and heartbreak. This wasn't just a betrayal of our marriage, it was a calculated, methodical dismantling of everything I thought we stood for. Julia hadn't just been unfaithful, she had used her affair to advance her career, stepping over me like I was nothing more than a rung on the ladder of her ambition, and yet through it all, she still had the audacity to come home and act like she was the perfect wife. The sheer arrogance of it was staggering. I closed my laptop, my mind racing. The truth was out now, laid bare in black and white. But what was I supposed to do with it? Confront her, file for divorce? Or was there another way, one that would make her feel even a fraction of the pain she had caused me? One thing was certain, Julia's mask was slipping, and it was only a matter of time before her carefully constructed facade came crashing down. The sheer arrogance of it was staggering. I closed my laptop, my mind racing. The truth was out now, laid bare in black and white. But what was I supposed to do with it? Confront her, file for divorce? Or was there another way? One that would make her feel even a fraction of the pain she had caused me. One thing was certain, Julia's mask was slipping, and it was only a matter of time before her carefully constructed facade came crashing down the next morning. I sat across from Julia at breakfast watching her sip her coffee as if nothing was wrong. She scrolled through her phone, occasionally smiling at something on the screen. I wondered if it was him, her boss. The thought made my stomach churn. I decided to test the waters. So this leadership conference in New York. I said casually, how long will you be gone? She barely looked up. A few days, maybe a week. It depends on how much they pack into the schedule. Must be exciting. I said, keeping my voice steady, any chance I could tag along, turn it into a little getaway. Her reaction was immediate. Her head snapped up, and for a split second, I saw something in her eyes, panic, annoyance. She quickly masked it with a forced laugh. Oh, Mike, it's all work. You'd be bored out of your mind. I don't mind boring, I said, holding her gaze. It's New York, after all, plenty to do while you're in meetings. She hesitated, her smile faltering. I don't think it's a good idea. I'll be so busy, and honestly, I'd hate for you to waste your time. Her tone was dismissive, almost condescending, and it was all I could do to keep my anger in check. Right, I said. Nodding, wouldn't want to interfere. The rest of breakfast passed in silence. Julia seemed relieved when she finally left for work, and as soon as she was out the door, I pulled out the file Karen had sent me. The details of her affair were crystal clear now, and I knew exactly what I had to do. That evening, I confronted her indirectly. Hey, Jules, I said, as she walked in the door. Funny thing happened today. I got an email from Karen, the private investigator. I hired. Her face paled, but she quickly recovered, forcing a laugh. What are you talking about, private investigator? Are you feeling okay? I smiled, holding up my phone. Yeah, I've been feeling off lately. Thought I might be imagining things, so I had her follow you around. Turns out I wasn't imagining anything at all. Julia froze, her keys still in her hand. Mike, this is insane. You're being paranoid, am I? I interrupted, my voice cold because Karen's got pictures, Julia, of you with him. I know everything. Her face twisted in anger and fear, but she said nothing for once. She didn't have a comeback, and I relished the silence. Sit down. I said, my voice firm. We're not done yet. Julia's face was a mix of anger and fear. As she reluctantly sat down at the kitchen table, she folded her arms, trying to appear defiant, but I could see the cracks forming in her mask. All right, Mike, she said, her voice laced with venom. Let's hear it. What evidence do you think you have? I placed my phone on the table and slid it toward her, the screen showing one of the photos Karen had sent me. Julia and her boss, hand in hand, walking into a hotel together. Her eyes widened, and for a brief moment she looked like a deer caught in headlights. But then she laughed. A sharp, bitter sound that made my blood boil. You hired someone to stalk me. That's disgusting. Mike, do you even hear yourself? Don't turn this around on me. I snapped, my voice colder than I had ever heard it. I wouldn't have had to do this if you hadn't lied to me, if you hadn't cheated on me. Her expression shifted the anger, fading into something more calculated. All right, fine, she said, leaning back in her chair. You want the truth? Yes, I've been seeing him, but do you really think I'd be doing this if I was happy here? My jaw clenched. You were blaming me after everything I've done for you. I've supported you, stayed home so you could focus on your career, taking care of everything so you didn't have to worry. And maybe that's the problem, she interrupted, her tone icy. You've made yourself small, uninteresting. Do you even have a life outside of me, Mike, or are you just here waiting for me to come home like some pathetic house pet? Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I had expected denial, maybe even an apology, but this was cruelty wrapped in justification. I stared at her, stunned into silence as she continued to look. She said, sighing dramatically, I didn't mean for this to happen, but it did. And you know what? He makes me feel alive, excited, something I haven't felt with you in years. I could feel my hands shaking, but I refused to let her see how much her words were cutting me. So what's your plan, Julia? Keep stringing me along while you play house with him on the side. Her eyes narrowed. I haven't decided yet, but honestly, Mike, maybe you should think about what you want because this, she gestured between us, isn't working. I leaned forward, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. You're right, Julia. This isn't working, but don't worry. I'm already working on a solution. She smirked, clearly thinking I was bluffing. But as I stood up and walked out of the room, I knew one thing for certain. The woman sitting at that table had no idea what was coming next, and I was going to make sure she regretted every word, every lie, every betrayal. The next few days were a blur of quiet planning. Julia seemed to think our confrontation was over, that I would sulk in silence while she continued to play her twisted game. She carried on as if nothing had happened, smiling, scrolling through her phone, and leaving for work with the same self-assured air she always had, but I wasn't the same man anymore. Her words had lit a fire in me, and for once, I wasn't going to let her walk all over me. The first thing I did was call Karen again. I needed more than just photos and receipts. I needed every detail of Julia's double life. Karen, sensing the shift in my tone, didn't hesitate. I'll dig deeper. She said, if there's more to find, I'll find it. Meanwhile, I started quietly securing my finances. Julia had always been careless with our money, leaving most of the accounts in my name. It wasn't hard to move funds into a private account she didn't know about. I also changed the passwords to anything. She had access to banking apps, streaming services, even the Wi-Fi, small moves, but ones that gave me a sense of control I hadn't felt in years by the time Karen called me with her latest findings. I was ready for whatever she had to say, but what she told me still hit like a sledgehammer, Mike. She began, her voice measured. I found something you need to see. She emailed me a file, and when I opened it, my stomach dropped. There were more photos, but this time they weren't just of Julia and her boss. There were receipts for gifts. She had bought him expensive watches, designer clothes, all paid for with our joint account. And then there was the kicker, a hotel booking for two in New York. The leadership conference was just a cover. As I stared at the evidence, a plan began to form in my mind. Julia thought she was in control, but she had no idea the storm that was coming. That evening when she came home, I greeted her with a smile. Hey, Jules, I said, trying to keep my tone light. I was thinking, why don't we have a nice dinner this weekend, just the two of us? Her eyes narrowed slightly as if she didn't trust the sudden change in my demeanor. Sure, she said cautiously. What's the occasion? No occasion, I replied. Just thought it'd be nice to spend some time together. She shrugged, clearly uninterested but unwilling to argue. All right, fine, make a reservation. What Julia didn't know was that the dinner was going to be far from romantic. It was going to be the beginning of her reckoning. When Saturday came, I dressed in my best suit and made sure everything was set. The restaurant was one of her favorites, fancy, expensive, the kind of place she loved to show off. I made sure we had a private table away from prying eyes because the conversation we were about to have wasn't meant for an audience. Julia arrived late, as usual, breezing in like she owned the place she was dressed to kill, in a sleek black dress, her hair and makeup flawless for a moment. I wondered if she was dressing up for me or for someone else. Wow, you clean up nice, she said, as she sat down, flashing me a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. So do you, I replied, my voice calm. I poured us both a glass of wine, waiting until the waiter had taken our orders. Before I leaned forward, I know about New York, I said, keeping my tone low but firm. Her smile faltered, but she quickly recovered. What about it? The hotel, the reservation, the fact that it's not for a leadership conference? Her face went pale, and for the first time I saw genuine panic in her eyes. Mike, I can explain. Don't, I interrupted. I've heard enough of your lies. I know about him, Julia. I know everything. She sat back, crossing her arms defensively. So what are you here to humiliate me, to make some big scene? No, I said, shaking my head. I'm here to give you a choice. Her eyebrows shot up. A choice? Yes, I said, sliding an envelope across the table in there. You'll find two things. One is a list of lawyers I've already spoken to. The other is a non-disclosure agreement. You get to choose how this ends. She opened the envelope with trembling hands, her eyes scanning the documents inside. You're divorcing me, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I am, I said, my tone devoid of emotion, but how messy this gets is up to you. You can sign the NDA, walk away quietly, and keep what's left of your dignity. Or we can go to court and I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what you've been doing behind my back. Her hands clenched the papers, her jaw tightening. You wouldn't try me, I said, my voice cold as steel. You've spent years underestimating me, Julia. That ends tonight. For the first time, she was silent. Her confidence shattered. And for the first time, I felt like I was finally in control. Julia sat there staring at the papers, in her trembling hands. Her usual bravado was gone, replaced by a mix of panic and rage. For a moment, I thought she might lash out, but instead she let out a shaky laugh. You've really thought this through, haven't you? She said, her voice dripping with bitterness. I have, I replied calmly. Unlike you, I don't make impulsive decisions. I spent weeks putting this together. Julia, I wanted to make sure there was no way for you to twist this back on me. She narrowed her eyes, you think. You're so clever. Don't you acting like some victim while you've been playing detective behind my back? I leaned forward, my voice cold. Don't mistake my patience for weakness. You've been lying to me, stealing from me, and humiliating me for months. Did you really think I wouldn't figure it out? She opened her mouth to respond, but I held up a hand. Don't bother denying it. The evidence is all there. The photos, receipts, text messages. You can't talk your way out of this. Her face twisted with anger. So what? Now you want me to just sign this and walk away like nothing happened? I leaned back, meeting her gaze. That's exactly what I want. You've already destroyed our marriage, Julia. I'm just giving you a chance to leave without dragging us both through the mud. She scoffed, tossing the envelope onto the table. And what if I don't? What if I fight this? I smiled, a cold, calculated smile that I knew would unnerve her. Then I'll make sure everyone knows the truth. Your boss, your colleagues, your family, hell, even your precious social media followers. How do you think they'll react when they find out the woman who brags about her perfect life is nothing but a liar and a cheat? Julia's face went pale, and for a moment I thought she might cry, but instead she straightened her shoulders, forcing a smirk. You think you're so righteous, Mike? But let me tell you something. You were never enough for me. That's why this happened. Her words cut deep, but I refused to let her see the impact. Instead, I stood up, adjusting my suit jacket. You've made your feelings clear, Julia. Now it's time for you to make a choice. Sign the papers and leave quietly, or fight me and lose everything either way. This is over, without waiting for her response. I walked out of the restaurant, leaving her sitting there in stunned silence. When I got home, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Anger, sadness, and an odd sense of relief for the first time in months. I felt like I was in control of my life again. I poured myself a glass of whiskey and sat down at the kitchen table staring at the folder. Karen had given me the evidence that had once felt like a knife to the heart, now felt like a shield protecting me from any more of Julia's lies. The next morning I woke up to find Julia sitting in the living room, the signed papers in her lap. Her eyes were red and her makeup was smudged, but she still managed to look defiant. Fine, she said, tossing the papers onto the coffee table. You win, Mike. Are you happy now? I picked up the papers, checking to make sure everything was in order before responding. This isn't about winning, Julia. This is about moving on. You made your choices, and now I'm making mine. She stood up, grabbing her purse. You'll regret this, she hissed, her voice shaking with barely contained rage. You'll regret throwing me away. I didn't respond as she stormed out of the house. The door slammed behind her, and for the first time in years, the silence felt comforting. But I knew this wasn't the end. Julia was many things, but she wasn't the type to back down easily and deep down. I knew she would try to make me pay for taking control of my life. The days following Julia's departure were quiet, almost eerily, so I kept my guard up, knowing her well enough to expect retaliation. Julia wasn't the type to accept defeat gracefully, and her parting words echoed. In my mind, you'll regret this. It didn't take long for her to strike. One morning, I woke up to find my phone flooded with messages from friends, coworkers, and even distant relatives Julia had taken to social media, spinning a web of lies about our marriage. According to her posts, I was controlling, insecure, and had driven her into the arms of someone who actually cared about her. The narrative she crafted painted me as the villain, and to my frustration, many people seemed to believe her comments poured in under her posts, full of sympathy for her and disdain for me. You deserve better, Julia. Stay strong. He sounds toxic. I wanted to fire back to defend myself, but I knew better. Engaging in her public circus would only drag me down to her level. Instead, I called Karen one last time. I need you to send me the cleanest, most undeniable piece of evidence you have, I told her. Karen hesitated. Mike, are you sure this could get messy? I'm done playing nice, I said firmly. Send it. Later that day, I received a new email from Karen. It contained a video, a crystal clear recording from the hotel's lobby cameras. It showed Julia and her boss embracing before heading upstairs together. The timestamp was from the same night she claimed to be too exhausted to talk to me. I stared at the video for a long time, weighing my options. This was my ace, my way of shutting down her lies, once and for all. But was it worth it? Did I really want to stoop to her level that evening, as I sat in the quiet of my now empty house? I decided that enough was enough. I uploaded the video to a secure file sharing platform and sent the link to a few close friends and family members who had reached out, confused by Julia's claims. I included a simple message. This is the truth. Believe what you want. The fallout was immediate. Within hours, I began receiving apologies from people who had initially taken Julia's side. Mike, I had no idea. I'm so sorry. She's unbelievable. If you need anything, let me know. Julia's carefully crafted narrative collapsed like a house of cards. She tried to do damage control, deleting her posts and blocking anyone who questioned. But it was too late, the truth was out, and there was no recovering from it. A week later, I received the finalized divorce papers. Seeing her signature next to mine felt bittersweet. This wasn't how I had imagined our marriage ending, but I knew it was the right decision. The day after the papers were filed, Julia showed up at the house unannounced. Her face was pale, her eyes red from crying. She stood on the porch, clutching her purse, like it was the only thing holding her together. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice trembling. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "What's there to talk?" "About Julia." It's over, her lip quivered. I didn't mean for it to end like this. I don't know what to do without you." Her sudden vulnerability caught me off guard, but I didn't let it sway me. "You made your choices," I said, my voice firm. "Now you have to live with them." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I know, I'm sorry, Mike, for everything." For a moment, I almost felt pity for her but then I remembered the lies, the betrayal, and the way she had tried to tear me down when I finally stood up for myself. "You're sorry because you got caught," I said, my voice steady. "Not because of what you did." Julia didn't respond. She just stood there, her shoulders slumped, before finally turning and walking away. As I closed the door, I felt a strange sense of closure. For the first time in years, I felt free, not just from Julia, but from the version of myself who had spent so long living in her shadow. This wasn't the life I had planned, but it was a fresh start, and for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful about the future.